What's up, everybody? All right, so this is video number 2 into our series following the intro. And then the last video, I was explaining how the two witnesses are churches and not just two dudes like Moses and Elijah. So these next couple videos aren't going to make a whole lot of sense if you don't listen to what I've said previously. So I would encourage you, go ahead right now, just put this on pause, listen to the intro, and then listen to the first video. Because in this video, I'm going to expound a little further on the two witnesses being what I believe the Church of Smyrna and the Church of Philadelphia. But before I go too far on that, I did a little bit of a word study on the word witnesses, and it is translated to martus. Martus. Okay, so like martyrs. Essentially, faithful witnesses, faithful even to the point of death. And that word used in the New Testament is used in a lot of different ways. But most commonly, it's used as witnesses being people in churches, faithful followers of the way, you could say, of Jesus Christ. It's also used, Paul often uses that word to basically saying God as my witness. And I think that's a faithful way to use that as well, because we know, according to the Bible, that only God is truly faithful. But then when we get to the New Testament, past the writings of Paul, it comes back to that same definition of the faithful witnesses, like the individuals that were spoken of primarily in the uses of the book of Acts. So, as I said yesterday, witnesses is used in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, where the Bible says that you will be my witnesses to the ends of the earth. And that literally means a bunch of people in churches, right? Not just one church, though there is only one church of Christ. Obviously, Jesus spoke to the seven spirits of the seven churches in Revelation chapter 2 and 3. So there's more than one church. But why two witnesses, right? Why two witnesses? I think it comes back to the Old Testament notion of judgment being established by two or three witnesses. And this is supported in 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 1, where it says, every matter must be established by the testimony of two or three witnesses. And it's also, again, spoken in Hebrews chapter 10. Just going to flip there. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 28, where it says, anyone who rejected the law of Moses died without mercy on the testimony of two or three witnesses. So this language is really important to understand, that what the point of the two witnesses isn't to be just prophets only, though that is part of the point. They will go prophesying. But it is also to establish the judgment of God that's about to be carried out over the earth throughout the rest of the tribulation. Now, to understand why there needs to be two witnesses, okay, so we just established why there needs to be two witnesses at least, right? It could have been three. It's not, though. The Bible is prophesying for two witnesses in Revelation chapter 11. But before we go too far on that, I just want to mention this. A church has a hierarchy of leadership, okay? And if the church is being pointed to in Revelation chapter 7, again, I know everybody wants to say they're the Jews. Go back to my last two videos, and I explain how there is now neither Jew nor Gentile. The two olive trees means two bodies, whether wild or natural, grafted into one, being two olive trees, meaning two churches. And I point out how, I'm going to point out how this is, I believe, is Smyrna and Philadelphia. But just to lay the framework first, I have to point this out, that the Bible, in throughout all of these texts, like the things that we're about to talk about, is very specific in the numbers, right? So Revelation chapter 7 and Revelation chapter 14, they both speak about the 144,000, right? In Revelation chapter 7, it explains the 12 tribes and 12,000 per 12 tribes. So in total, if we're saying there's two witnesses of 144,000, this would have to mean 288,000. Well, that makes sense when you read the text around it as it pertains to church leadership in heaven, when it's specifically speaking to the elders, okay? And I've done a little bit of study on this too, just to try and make sure I wasn't wrong or far off on this. But the only times that I can ever see elders being used in relationship to church members or witnesses is as it pertains to church leadership, okay? So in Revelation, throughout this stuff, immediately following Revelation chapter 2 and 3, as it talks to the seven churches and the seven golden lampstands, it sprinkles in different elders, and it's always talking about 24 elders. Okay, so if you're just even a little bit keen on math, 24 is easily divisible with 288,000 witnesses. It's very important to understand that if the Bible was intending for the two witnesses to be only one body, it could say just one witness in this context, the way that I'm explaining this, right? So instead, it's two witnesses, two churches, not one witness, because we need to establish a matter by two or three witnesses, which is what judgment is established by God. Okay, so that makes sense like that. But there are two bodies of 144,000 who are sealed to do something specific. Again, I'm going to get to the Smyrna and Philadelphia thing, but I think I need to make that the next two videos. We have to understand that there are 24 elders, not 12. Okay, it's a very specific number, and it has a very specific reason. If you can apply this, elders, meaning church leaders, to Smyrna and Philadelphia as it pertains to the 12,000 per 12 tribes, it works and it fits perfectly. It just makes too much sense, especially as it's embedded throughout the text, as it's talking literally about the seven golden lampstands, the two witnesses, and the 144,000. For example, I've written down all of the citations of where you can find the words elders, and specifically it's talking about the 24 elders. It doesn't say 24 elders every single time, but it's implied. Revelation 4:4, surrounding the throne were 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders. 4:10, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne. Revelation 5:5, then one of the elders said to me, do not weep. And then 5:6, it says, is encircled by four living creatures and the elders. In verse 8, and when he had taken it, the four living creatures and the 24 elders fell down. Okay, I can read every single one of them, but in chapter, you can keep finding them in chapter 5, verse 14, chapter 7, verse 11, which is immediately following context of the 144,000. That really matters. Also found in chapter 7, verse 13. You can find it in chapter 11, verse 6. Again, immediately following the context of the two witnesses. Okay, you can find it again in chapter 14, verse 13. That is also following after the 144,000 in chapter 14 as well. And then you don't see it again until you get to Revelation chapter 19, verse 4. So in a nutshell, two lampstands, two olive trees, two sets of 144,000, because it works perfectly with 24 elders. I'll see you on the next two videos, and I'll explain why it's Smyrna and Philadelphia.